The small nation of Belgium has been the victim of invasion and occupation by Germany twice in the past 110 years. In 1914, the forces of Kaiser Wilhelm II overran Belgium, and the atrocities which followed made headline news throughout the world. The German occupation of neutral Belgium enraged the Western allies of Britain and France, and the atrocities that occurred there, as well as some that did not, were used by the Allies to recruit soldiers and to raise money for the war effort. In 1940, the Germans under Hitler invaded and occupied Belgium once again. It should come as no surprise that the Nazis perpetrated hundreds of atrocities in Belgium during the war, including the elimination of many Belgian Jews in the camps of the Holocaust. There is no doubt that Belgium was the victim of horrific acts during the Germans' two occupations, but many people do not know that Belgium itself carried out crimes against humanity in its occupation of today's Congo in Southwest Africa. Many historians and sociologists classify what happened in Belgium as a genocide, and lay much of the blame for it at the feet of one man, Belgian King Leopold II, who reigned as King of Belgium from 1865 to 1909, and as the ruler of the Congo Free State from 1885 to 1908. Over the last few years, many Belgians, including many of African descent, have brought much of what happened in the Congo to light in their country. But outside Belgium, there are many people who do not know what happened there in the late 1800s. The official title of the Belgian kings is King of the Belgians. In Belgium, there is a difference between the titles King of Belgium and the King of the Belgians. The first suggests that the monarch is the owner of all of the country's land. The second title implies that he simply reigns over the Belgians in the constitutional monarchy that's existed in the country since it separated from Holland and the United Kingdom of the Netherlands in 1830. The Belgian king, and it's been a king, not a queen since independence, was never an absolute monarch, though in the 19th century the king had considerable more power and influence than King Philippe does today. The problem for Leopold was that he really wanted to be that king. You know, the "your wish is my command, sire" type king. And he could not be that kind of a king to the Belgians, who had gone through much debate, internal strife, and some bloodshed to prevent that kind of absolute monarchy in Belgium. Much of Western Europe was going through the second age of imperialism in the latter part of the 19th century. Great Britain's empire spanned the globe, the largest empire the world has ever seen. The French controlled a great deal of Africa and parts of the Middle East. Italy had a small African empire. Holland had extensive colonies in the Pacific, most notably today's Indonesia. Even declining Spain and Portugal had colonies in Africa and the Far East in the late 1800s. Some in Belgium called Leopold II the Great Builder, for in Belgium he sponsored and promoted the building of new roads, public buildings, and a variety of public works, many of which are still in existence. Many in the country believed that was his purpose in attempting to gain the Congo River area for Belgium, to improve and modernize the vast forested territory. He also wanted to spread the Christian faith and to bring Western culture and technology to the area. There were some major problems with Leopold's plan. First, many Belgians did not want to enter the race for empire, as some people called the late 1800s. They knew that even if colonies did strengthen their country in some way, and they usually didn't, except in the case of Britain, having more territory, especially on a continent being fought over by the major powers of Britain, France, and later Germany, would increase the chances of war. A war which the Belgians knew they could not win. What's more, colonies cost money, and very few ever showed a profit for the mother country. Quite the opposite, actually. They were money pits, and the Belgian government, which Leopold was but the ceremonial head of, refused to authorize Leopold's plan. So he found a workaround. In 1869, Henry Morgan Stanley, a British journalist and explorer, went in search of another missing Englishman, Dr. David Livingstone, who had gone missing somewhere in Central Africa during his search for the source of the Nile River. 2 years later, Stanley found Livingstone near Lake Tanganyika in modern Tanzania, surrounded by what Stanley believed were hostile tribesmen. With a British sense of irony and understatement, Stanley approached Livingstone, the only other white person present, and uttered what became incredibly famous words throughout the Western world. "Dr. Livingstone, I presume?" Stanley and Livingstone became famous figures throughout the world, and Stanley in particular saw the potential in the land he had passed through to find the good doctor, whose purpose was to find a way to end the still thriving African slave trade, most of those enslaved people being sent to the Middle East or to rival tribes within Africa. Stanley's exploits brought him to the attention of Leopold, and the king hired the Welshman as his own personal agent in the Congo River basin. Now, it may strike us as odd today, but King Leopold, with the tacit agreement of the Belgian government and the approval of the Western European nations at the Berlin Conference of 1884 to 85, simply claimed much of today's Congo as his. It's that simple. He sent mercenaries to enforce his rule, and the territory became known as the Congo Free State. What's more, the Belgian government loaned the king much of the money he would need in his attempt to control and improve the area, despite their fears of losing their investment, which they eventually did. Since Leopold was the owner of the Congo Free State, he was able to control it as the absolute ruler. Congo was essentially Leopold's cash cow. The easiest and most profitable item to be found in Congo at the time was ivory, but as you might guess, it only took a short time for most of the elephants in Congo to be killed off. Not only that, but in the late 1800s, a new natural resource, rubber, competed with oil for profitability. Leopold ordered that Congo be turned into as large a rubber plantation as possible, and that's what happened. Congo is 79 times the size of Belgium, and it all belonged to Leopold. Slavery was illegal in Belgium. It was not illegal in the Congo. Whatever Leopold said was legal was legal. Perhaps more exactly, it seems that Leopold did not care what was done in Congo and to the many different tribes of the Congo, as long as he got paid from the trade in rubber and other natural resources. Let's be honest, the Western European nations and the United States were incredibly racist at the time. Though all of these countries had done away with actual slavery, the treatment of non-white minorities, especially of black people, was horrible. This was especially the case in the African colonies, and though the treatment of black Africans in English and French territories can be described as less severe than that of Germany, Belgium, and Portugal, the native people were treated as second or third-class people in their own countries. We don't use the words second-class citizens because the people of colonial Africa were not citizens. They were ruled by outsiders from above. The attitude of Leopold and the people who worked for him in the Congo was particularly horrific. It ranged from disinterest to outright cruelty. It also needs to be said that many of the men working as mercenaries for Leopold in Congo were black Africans as well, usually men from tribes hostile to many of those working on the rubber plantations and elsewhere. Towards the end of Leopold's reign in Congo, there were approximately 120 European officers and sergeants commanding nearly 4,000 African soldiers in what was called the Force Publique. Among those people was the Zapo-Zap tribe, their real name. The Zapo-Zaps were a warrior culture from eastern Congo and had instilled fear throughout the region for some time. One of the most frightening things about the Zapo-Zaps, in addition to their proclivity to slaughter groups of innocent villagers on rubber plantations, was the fact that they sharpened their teeth. Yes, many of the men had teeth that looked like a nightmare picture from some horrible movie about vampires or cannibals. And yes, the Zapo-Zaps were cannibals. They practiced cannibalism especially at ceremonies, but also after their raids. Brains, eyeballs, and most of the rest of the human body was considered a delicacy. They fried human flesh much like people fry bacon. And these were some of the men that made up the Force Publique. The Zappo-Zaps were not prevented from the practice by their officers, provided they did not see it. It was one of the many ways that Leopold maintained control over the population. What was going on in Congo eventually became public knowledge. Belgian officers and NCOs returning home, missionaries, journalists, and others openly discussed what they had seen. Eventually, photographs of what was going on in the Congo reached England, France, the USA, and Belgium. Many people were outraged by what they saw in the photos, which included not only smiling Zappo-Zaps, but evidence of other atrocities. Perhaps the last image of the slaughter that took place in the Congo region came in the form of amputated hands, arms, legs, and feet. In order to get paid and to save money on bullets, the men of the Force Publique cut off the hands, etc. of those they punished for not producing their required quota of rubber and other resources. Literal mountains of hands were photographed by journalists and published throughout the Western world. One of the most infamous pictures from the time is of a man who escaped Congo with the hand and foot of his young daughter. The rest of her had been eaten by the Zappo-Zaps. It's estimated that anywhere between 1 and 10 million people died or were killed as a result of Leopold's occupation of the Congo. Latest estimates point towards the higher figure. Many hundreds of thousands were beaten, whipped, and otherwise abused. Infection from wounds caused hundreds of thousands of deaths, perhaps more. Additionally, the people on the rubber plantations were forbidden to leave, and the food coming into the plantations was minimal, substandard, and often not delivered. Millions died from starvation or the diseases which ravaged a malnourished body. What's more, the crowding of so many people on plantations caused the many endemic and deadly diseases of the area to spread like wildfire. Millions more died from disease during the time of Leopold's rule. Finally, reports and testimony from people that had escaped the plantations and the many missionaries and journalists in the area who were working to bring the situation in Congo to the world's attention reached the eyes and ears of those in power in England, France, and the USA. Large protests in Western capitals also brought the situation, which was described as a crime against humanity by Black American military hero, historian, and minister George Washington Williams, home to millions in the Western world. Incidentally, the phrase crime against humanity developed for the first time because of the horrible conditions in Congo, which has since rightly been named a genocide by most historians. The pressure on Belgium to do something about the situation mounted to the point where they relieved Leopold of his property, but not without paying him 50 million francs for it, as well as hundreds of millions more to investors. In the end, Belgium took control of the Congo Free State itself, and the region became known as the Belgian Congo until it became independent in 1960. Belgian rule, as opposed to Leopold's personal rule, was relatively mild. Relatively being the key word, because anything less harsh than genocide is still pretty brutal. Leopold II never went to the Congo. Some people trying to protect the reputation of Belgium and of its king state that Leopold did not know what was going on in Congo. Leopold read newspapers. He also had many aides tell him what was happening there. What's more, upon giving up his rights there, Leopold ordered the destruction of the entire archive of documents pertaining to his time as owner of the Congo region. You don't have to be a genius to know why. We hope you enjoyed learning about this all too often overlooked chapter of history. For more content like this and much more, please subscribe to our growing channel, like this video, and hit the notification bell so that you'll know when a new A Day in History video comes out. Thank you for watching.